Good evening and welcome to the Commonwealth Club Silicon Valley program brought to you from the Santa Clara Convention Center. My name is Lata Krishnan. Our speaker this evening needs very little introduction. He is a best-selling author and physician and the founder of Chopra Center for Wellbeing in Carlsbad, California and Manhattan, New York. We are pleased to have him here tonight as it is the launch of his latest book, Reinventing the Body, Resurrecting the Soul, How to Create a New You. As I've known him for the past many years, I've just marveled at his brilliance, his intellect, and his ability to use his words and thoughts to reach so many hearts and minds all over the world. It's an absolute pleasure, delight, and privilege to join everyone here in the Silicon Valley. Let's give him a resounding welcome. Deepak Chopra.
That's good. So how's life? How's everyone? Do you believe that you have a soul? Because if you don't, then this is the wrong lecture, the wrong event. Okay, so when we use the word soul, what do we really mean? Anyone? Spirit. Okay. Let's use the word soul as synonymous with consciousness. Okay, because we're conscious beings, right? You're conscious right now. You're conscious of your thoughts, you're conscious of your body, you're conscious of this room, and your consciousness allows you to think, to perceive, to speak. When somebody's dead, then we say they have no consciousness, right? So, in a sense, consciousness is synonymous with life. Life and consciousness are synonymous. And if there's one mystery right now in science that has not really been solved, it's the mystery of consciousness. We know so much about the Big Bang, we know about astrophysics, we know cosmology, we know evolution. We are very advanced in our understanding of mathematics and the laws of physics and chemistry, biology, but consciousness eludes us. In fact, the more we understand biology, the more we understand how the nervous system works, the more difficult it becomes to understand consciousness. And one of the things, of course, is when you're looking for consciousness, it's your consciousness that's looking for consciousness, right? So when consciousness is looking for consciousness, then by definition, that's a subjective experience, right? Consciousness looking for consciousness is consciousness looking for itself. So by definition, that's a subjective experience, and science does not deal with subjectivity. Science deals with objective things. So that's one of the problems, where science finds consciousness so elusive. But let me see if I can give you a real idea of experientially what consciousness is. So just close your eyes for a second. And I want you to imagine that you're looking at a beautiful sunset on the ocean. Imagine that you're looking at a red rose with a green stem. You can smell the fragrance of the rose, feel the soft petals of the rose, touch the stem, run your finger up and down, feel the prickly thorns. Okay, now open your eyes. So, as I said these things, you had an experience, right? And it wasn't difficult. All you had was a very subtle intention, and then you had an experience. So, let's imagine that I was looking inside your brain today. And today we can do that. We have all kinds of technology to look inside the brain when you're thinking a thought. That's what we're doing right now, you're thinking. Today one can take a carbon atom and put it in a sugar molecule, radio label it, inject it, and then look at the brain as you're having these thoughts. It's called positron emission tomography, and there are other ways to do it, functional magnetic resonance scans, imaging. So let's say I was looking inside your brain when you were imagining a red rose or a beautiful sunset, or looking at that green stem, or feeling the sensation of the prickly thorns. Do you think if I was looking inside your brain, I would see the picture of a sunset? Obviously not, right? There are no pictures in your brain. There are no sounds, there are no sensations. The brain is very dark, and all it shows is electricity and electrochemical reactions. Basically, electrical impulses that go between neurons along synaptic networks. You can think of synaptic networks as small micro fiber optic channels, if you will. But you saw a picture, right? So where was that picture? The picture was in your consciousness, okay? It was not in your brain. Did the electricity in the brain create the picture? Or did the picture create the electricity? Or did your intention create both? And where did the intention come from? We're beginning to have some idea on this. But until recently, one of the greatest scientists of the world, Sir Arthur Eddington, said of things like this, he said, something unknown is doing we don't know what. The more we look inside the brain, the more elusive, as I said, consciousness becomes. So all your thoughts, your perceptions occur in consciousness. All your subjective experiences, imagination, desire, memory, intention, insight, intuition, creativity, inspiration, choice making. These are the attributes of your consciousness. Okay, now, instead of imagining things, tell me what is this color? Blue. So let's examine what's happening. There's some electromagnetic energy or wave or disturbance of electromagnetic energy that's coming from here to your eyes. Is that blue in color? No, otherwise we'd see blue beams coming from here to your eyes, right? But some invisible disturbance of one particular frequency of the electromagnetic spectrum is coming from there to your eyes. It's causing a disturbance there, an electromagnetic disturbance, a chemical reaction, and there's an electrical current going to your brain. And the current is not blue, and then there are synaptic networks that are firing electrical impulses between neurons, and they're not blue. So there's no blue there, there's no blue from there to there, and there's no blue as the electrical impulse goes to your brain, and there's no blue in your brain. Where's the blue? Where's the blue? In your consciousness. Where's Deepak? In your consciousness. Where is your own body? In your consciousness. Where are your thoughts? Where's this room? In your consciousness. Where's California? In your consciousness. Where's the United States? Where are the stars, galaxies, the sun and the moon? All in your consciousness. Okay. And the great rishis of India said, know that one thing by knowing which everything else is known. And that one thing is your own self, your own consciousness. Now, as I said, science has been trying to figure out the mystery of consciousness, which is synonymous with your animating life force or your soul, if you want, because your soul is your core consciousness. In the last century, there was a brilliant scientist by the name of Dr. Wilder Penfield, and he was also looking for the soul. He was a neurosurgeon, and when he would operate on his patients, in those days they neurosurgery under local anesthesia because your brain doesn't feel any pain when you operate on it. And he would stimulate different parts of the brain to see what was happening. So one of his experiments was one day he was stimulating a part of the brain called the motor cortex. And the motor cortex is that which controls movement of the body. So he's stimulating this, and the patient's arm started to go up like this. And so he asked the patient, what's happening? And the patient said, my arm is moving up. He said, are you moving your arm? And the patient said, no, it's moving up. Maybe you're moving it for me by stimulating my brain. And then the patient was told by Dr. Penfield, he said, even as I stimulate your brain in order for your arm to move like this, I want you to make a choice. I want you to move it somewhere else. And in one instance, the patient reached over from the other arm and pulled it in this direction. In another instance, he resisted the movement and put it somewhere else. And with that simple conclusion, Dr. Penfield came to a very interesting conclusion. With that simple experiment, he said the brain is telling the body to go like this, but there's someone here who's telling the brain, I'm not going to let you do that, I'm going to move it like this. He said there's a choice maker that can override the commands of the brain to the body. He said, I know where the command post is, but where is the commander? The choice maker that overrides the commands of the brain to the body. And like that, Dr. Penfield did many other experiments to look for that person inside you who's all the time making choices and all the time making interpretations of experience. You know, we remember things, we interpret them. You are a choice maker. In every moment of your life, you're making choices about the future, and you're also remembering the past, and you're interpreting this past. And then you have imagination and creativity and all the things I have mentioned. This essential you cannot be found inside your body or inside your brain. And there's a very simple principle in science. It's called Occam's principle, named after a scientist called Occam. And he said, when you don't have an explanation, then the simplest explanation is probably the correct explanation. So what's the simplest explanation that you can't be found in your body or in your brain? What's the simplest explanation? You're not there. The simplest explanation that your consciousness cannot be found in your brain or your body, that your soul can't be found, is that you're not in it. So these days there are lots of very interesting books on so-called out-of-body experiences, when the real mystery is how do we manage to get an in-body experience without being in it? You are not in your body. Your body is in you. You're not in your mind is in you. You're not in this world, the world is in you. This was the greatest brilliant insight of the rishis of the Upanishads. They said, I'm not in the body is in me. I'm not in the mind is in me. Me meaning my core consciousness. I'm not in the world is in me. The body, the mind, the world, they happen to me as I curve back within myself and I create again and again. It's right there in the Upanishads, in the Bhagavad Gita. Lord Krishna, when he speaks to Arjuna, explains this as one of the teachings of yoga. It says, Prakratim swam vashtabhai vishrajami puna puna. Curving back within myself, I create. I create my mind, I create my body, and I create the whole universe. So this is very ancient wisdom, but it's finding some validity in science today. Because according to science, and I'm not now talking philosophy or speculation or metaphysics or anything of the sort, we're talking about our modern technology. If you can surf the information highway today, you can Twitter, if you can send email or text message someone, all these technologies are based on a very fundamental premise in science. And what's the fundamental premise in science? the essential nature of the physical world is that it's not physical. The essential nature of the material world is it's not material. The essential stuff of the universe is non-stuff. Everything that we call matter is made up of molecules. The molecules are made up of atoms. The atoms are subatomic particles that are moving at lightning speeds around huge empty spaces. And these subatomic particles are not things. What are these subatomic particles? According to science, they are probability clouds in a huge emptiness. And in fact, if there's one terminology that scientists agree upon, they say that the essential nature of the physical world is that it's a discontinuity. Discontinuity means something that's going on and off. And at the most fundamental levels, it's, you might say, if you want to simplify it, it's an electromagnetic field of virtual photons that are going on and off. So if you could see things as they really are, not through the artifact of your sensory apparatus, which is really an artifact, you'd see the huge electromagnetic storm that's going on and off. But our sensory apparatus cannot process information at that speed, so we experience continuity. It's like when you go to the movies, you see continuity on the screen, but actually a movie is a series of still frames that are being flashed on and off. Or when you see a Christmas light going around a Christmas tree, there's no light actually traveling around a tree. There are light bulbs that are going on and off, and you can't process it, so you can't see the off between the ons, and the memory of the on lingers in the off, so you see a moving light. Or when you see a moving picture on your television screen, there's no picture that travels across the screen, only electrons and photons. They go on and off a certain pattern. The picture and the movement of the picture is in your consciousness. So all our experience of the world depends on discontinuity, and yet we experience continuity. Right now, my vocal cords are going on and off. Photons are bouncing off your retina on and off. If you taste, smell something, that sends an on-off signal to your brain. Even touch is based on on-off. If I put my hand on your thigh and I don't move it, after a while you won't know it's there. If I start to move it again, you might say, what the heck are you trying to do? Okay? So our experience of continuity depends on discontinuity. Okay? If I take your picture with my BlackBerry and I send it to somebody in China, then a picture doesn't go from here, right? An on-off signal goes from here. Goes through these walls, goes through your body, etc., etc. Even when the signal reaches their computer, there's no picture on the screen. There's just these on-off signals that then travel to their eyes, to their brain. The picture is in their consciousness. Am I making sense? Okay. So the question today is not what's in the on, but what's in the off. Because between every two ons, there's an off. What's in the discontinuity? And several years ago, I got into a conversation with some really brilliant scientists who spent their lives thinking about this. And so I said, let's talk about this. And so, there is general agreement among scientists about 5 attributes of the discontinuity. And I want you to try and remember these. The first attribute is, in the discontinuity, there's no energy, there's no information, there's no space-time, and there are no objects. So what's there? And the best answers that science can give you is there are infinite possibilities. There are superpositions of waves of possibility. So the discontinuity is the immeasurable potential for energy, information, space-time, and what we call matter. Matter doesn't exist out there. Matter is in our consciousness. Without consciousness, it remains a radically ambiguous and ceaselessly flowing quantum soup. The second attribute of the discontinuity is that it's infinitely correlative. It correlates everything, and this is a technical word for this is entanglement. Everything is entangled with everything, and it's all at once. So in nature, things don't happen one at a time. Everything happens all at once. The human body, for example, which is a biological organism, but all biological organisms are part of nature. And nature itself, now planet Earth, is thought to be a biological organism. Everything happens all at once, and everything is correlated with everything else. The human body, for example, has 100 trillion cells, which is more than all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Each cell performs 100,000 activities every second, and every cell instantly knows and tracks the activity of every other cell and correlates it. How does a human body think thoughts, play a piano, kill germs, remove toxins, and make a baby all at the same time? And while your body can do that, it tracks the movement of stars and planets because your biological rhythms are the symphony of the whole universe. So non-local correlation is actually a technical mathematical term for omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence. Everything happening all at once, everything correlated with everything all at once. The third attribute of the discontinuity is that it proliferates with uncertainty. You cannot compute the laws of nature at the most fundamental level. Einstein, who first was very uncomfortable with uncertainty, when he said, I don't believe that God would play dice with the universe, later on went to say, insofar as the laws of nature are real, they are uncertain. Insofar as they are uncertain, they are not real. Which means at a certain level, nature precludes you from understanding it, rationally or mathematically. The fourth attribute is something called quantum leaps, where subatomic particles move from one location to a new location without going through the space in between. So if you watch the movie Star Trek or the television program, it's when the captain says, beam me up, Scotty. Scotty presses a button. Captain disappears here, shows up in another dimension of space-time without going through the space in between. And the fifth attribute is observer effect, which, according to John Wheeler, who just died last year at the age of 97, and he, along with some other scientists, about 40, 50 years ago, said the physical universe does not exist unless a conscious being is looking at it. So if you weren't looking at the universe, it would remain a vibration, or some sentient being or unit of sentience was not looking. Okay, enough of the technical stuff. These attributes are the attributes of your own consciousness. And the reason no one can find it, first of all, is it's a subjective experience, but secondly, it doesn't exist in space-time. Where are you experiencing space-time right now? Where are you experiencing space? In your consciousness. But your consciousness is spaceless. Where are you experiencing time right now? In your consciousness. But your consciousness itself is timeless. You know, again, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, water cannot wet it, wind cannot dry it, weapons cannot cleave it, fire cannot burn it, it's ancient, it's unborn, it doesn't die. So your consciousness, which is spaceless, timeless, dimensionless, gives rise to space-time dimensionality. Everything that we call real, including your body. Now if we totally get this, okay, that our body is experienced and created in consciousness, then where can it be transformed? At what level? In consciousness. If it's created in consciousness, then you can only transform it in consciousness. Okay, so on basis of this, and on the basis of some really good science, I came up in this book with 5 breakthroughs for the body and 5 breakthroughs for the soul. And then the last part of the book is 10 steps to wholeness. But let's just look at the 5 breakthroughs for the body. The first breakthrough for the body is that your body is not a structure. That's a perceptual lie. Our senses don't tell us the truth. After all, your senses tell you the earth is flat. Nobody believes that anymore. The senses tell you that this ground you are standing on is stationary, and we know it's spinning at dizzying speeds and hurtling through space at thousands of miles an hour. And then senses tell us our bodies are anatomical. They're not. Our bodies are a process in consciousness, and in fact your body recycles itself once a year. 98% of all the atoms in your body recycle once a year. It's a process in consciousness. And the process, of course, through eating, breathing, digestion, metabolism, elimination, thought, feeling, emotions, memory, imagination, creativity, elimination, all of that. But there's a process going on. And it's not a fixed process. So today we know there's a term that's been used a lot in science, neuronal plasticity, which means you can train your mind to change the structure of your brain, because your brain is not essentially a structure, it's a process. Okay, and there are lots of studies on Buddhist monks who can change the size of their brain, who can change body temperature, who can influence autonomic function, who can cause the secretion of neuropeptides and all kinds of things, okay, through meditations on contemplative meditations, or what the Buddhists call loving kindness, compassion, joy, profound peace, equanimity, because these practices allow you to go beyond your personal self into your transpersonal self. So your brain is not fixed, nor are your genes fixed, and that is a revolutionary finding that comes from here. Dr. Dean Ornish is one of the scientists who was part of the study that was published in the National Academy of Sciences, that within 3 months of changing your lifestyle in certain mental practices, stress management, meditation, yoga, breathing, diet, exercise, you can actually change the expression of 500 genes that code for things like heart disease, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, inflammation, obesity, and even certain types of cancer. As I said, the study was published, and now, of course, there's a lot of interest in what is called epigenetics. How do factors independent of the genes regulate the genes? Major breakthrough. Now you have to think, just for a second, that your genes are in every cell of your body. So every cell of your body has a nucleus, and there is DNA inside that, and genes are part of the DNA, and you can influence these genes. Think of genes as nanocomputers. Think of genes as quantum computers that, along with the epigenes, are regulating 100 trillion cells, performing 100,000 activities every second. And you can influence that. So that's the first breakthrough, based on solid science. Okay? The second breakthrough in the body is that your body is an energy field and an information field. Even though we think of it as a molecular field, it's a biological, but it's an energy field, really. If somebody gets their information, let's say you have a lot of money in the stock market, and it's all your retirement money, and then suddenly the stock market collapses, that one bit of information immediately changes biological information in your body, right? So information, whether it comes from the outside or generated inside. Somebody says, I think your wife is having an affair. Well, that'll change your information, biological information right away. Your blood pressure will go up, your heart rate will go up, your cortisol will go up. Okay, so information, whether it's generated internally or from the outside, will change your body. So we have to start thinking of the body. In biology, the technologies of information and energy, which we take for granted everywhere else, have not crept into the scientific way of thinking about the body. But if you can start to treat your body, and this is what the yogis did, by the way, they experienced their body, the astral body. What does the word astral body mean? Coming from the stars, because it is made out of photons, ultimately. Photons are the raw material. And you can learn to experience your body as a light body, a body that's nourished by photons. And again, ancient wisdom, but very modern understanding. That's the second breakthrough. The third breakthrough is that you can change your experience of time. What is time? Has anybody actually seen time? Time is a thing in consciousness too. You know people who say all the time, I'm running out of time. I have 10 deadlines. What a terrible word, by the way, deadlines. Okay, so when people have that internal dialogue, I'm running out of time, their biological clock speeds up. They have faster heart rate, jittery platelets with high levels of adrenaline, higher blood pressure, and when they suddenly drop dead of a heart attack, then they have run out of time. Okay? Or time is the internal dialogue that separates the observer from the observed. It's the measurement of experience. You learn a lot about it in the book, but you can shift how you experience time internally. You know, as somebody says, the beauty of the mountain was breathtaking, time stood still. Or, well, you fell in love, time didn't exist. So when you metabolize, there's a part of you that is timeless. Okay, so right now, in fact, as you're listening to me, turn your attention to who's listening. So as you're listening to me, be aware of who's listening. If you feel a still presence, that's your soul. It's not your mind which might be saying, I wish I'd gone to the bathroom before the lecture or whatever. You know, your mind is a conversation that happens in that awareness. And that awareness is timeless. It was there when you were a baby. Different body, different mind, different emotions, but that presence was there. So everything comes and goes, but it comes and goes in that presence. And once again, the great wisdom tradition said, hold on to that. That's the only part of you that's real. The rest, as the Buddha said, is a phantom, a dream. It comes and goes. Okay, so that's the third breakthrough. You can change your experience of time. The fourth breakthrough I've already mentioned, you can change the expression of your genes, just like you can change your brain. And the fifth breakthrough is you can always use your awareness to do this, because awareness is the key. The quality of your attention and the qualities of your intention. Now, I've tried to say a lot in a short time, but you'll find lots of interesting exercises to do this. Because when I say reinvent your body, I mean it literally. Okay? I'm doing it. I'm 63 today, by the way. Okay? Yeah. And I'm reinventing my body, and I'm inviting you to do the same. Okay, so you cannot do it though, other than being in touch with your soul, with your core consciousness. And just like there are 5 breakthroughs in the book about the body, there are 5 breakthroughs about the soul. How much time do we have? Almost done? Okay. So the 5 breakthroughs of the soul is, when you're in touch with this core consciousness, then your life is, first breakthrough is one of effortless spontaneity. Which means you should wake up every day and ask yourself only 3 questions. Is it fun? Is it easy? Am I getting results? And if you can't say yes to all 3, then you're not in touch with your soul, period. The second breakthrough of the soul is that when you are in touch with your soul, you spontaneously feel joy, love, compassion, kind, because you're connected to all of life. It's not an effort, it's who you are. The third breakthrough of the soul is that you have access to unlimited imagination and creativity, because in the discontinuity is the field of infinite possibilities. The fourth breakthrough of the soul is you experience what religious traditions call the state of grace, or in modern psychological terms, synchronicity, meaningful coincidences. And the fifth breakthrough of the soul, or the core consciousness, is that you recognize what the power of intention is, what we in India and the ancient traditions call sankalp, subtle action, subtle intention, and you choose evolution over entropy. So these are the 5 breakthroughs of the soul, and then you'll go, in the last part of the book are the 10 steps to do this. And even though these are ancient practices, I've done my best to make this understandable to everybody in modern times, because some of the terminologies of ancient wisdom traditions they seem esoteric, they seem metaphysical, they seem quote unquote a little foreign to us. So I've done my best to explain this in modern contemporary scientific language, and I've tried to base everything I said in the book on valid science. So thank you very much.
I have loads of questions from everyone. Happy
Okay.
birthday, first of all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now remember, when I said I'm 63, that's chronologically, not biologically, right? Biologically, I'm still 17. And psychologically, I'm still deciding what I'll do when I grow up.
Okay, the first question from a very special friend is love as humans experience it eternal or temporal, a product of evolution that helps us thrive as a species?
It's all of the above. Love is the most important experience a human being can have. But love has different flavors. There's romantic love, there's love of your children, there's love of your siblings, there's love of your parents, there's love of art, music, sex, there's love of God. So love has many flavors. The great Indian poet Tagore said, love is not a mere sentiment, it's the ultimate truth at the heart of creation. So every experience of love is valid. And, well, I could talk about this for a week, but it's also part of our evolution. It's a survival mechanism. When you have the experience of love, your biological responses begin to self-regulate. So there's a phenomenon called limbic resonance that happens in people who have emotional bonds. And limbic resonance restores homeostasis, which means self-regulation. The most important experience a person can have when they are healing is the experience of love. It's an expression of your soul, including romantic love. It's an act of the soul. Your neurons don't fall in love, you do.
There's hope for us all. We're in a time of immense change and upheaval. What is the best process for getting through the chaos into our soul and staying there?
It's an important question because people, always think, oh, now there's an economic whatever disaster, there's global warming, there's war, terrorism, there's social injustice, there's radical poverty. All these are actually the expressions of our not being in touch with ourselves. Okay? If you're in touch with yourself, and if there was a critical mass of consciousness that were in touch with themselves, all of that would change because we have actually caused these problems. And if you want to contribute to change, then in the words of Mahatma Gandhi, you have to be that change. Okay, you want peace in the world, start with yourself. Okay, you want to get rid of poverty in the world, make somebody that you know, help them, in their life. Take on one project that's not motivated by profit.
You're seen as a spiritual guide and philosopher by many. Whom would you consider your spiritual guides or favorite philosophers?
In recent times, J. Krishnamurti, the Indian philosopher and Indian teacher. Before him, people like Rabindranath Tagore, Vivekananda, Yogananda, and before that, the sages of the Upanishads, the Greek philosophers, the Chinese philosophers, Lao Tzu, and of course the great prophets of humanity from Jesus Christ to Buddha to Muhammad.
Positive thinking creates positive attitude which spreads happiness and success. But consciousness leading to cause or cure of physical illness, how does that work?
Okay, first of all, please get rid of the notion that positive thinking is a good thing, okay? It's the most stressful thing you can do. Okay? Have you ever been around somebody who's always exasperatingly positive? You have to be natural. And when you are in touch with the natural part of yourself that accepts the positive and negative traits that you have, because everybody has positive and negative traits. To have negative traits is not to be flawed, it's to be complete. We have the sacred and the profane inside us. We have the sinner and the saint inside us. We have forbidden lust inside us. We have unconditional love. If you can accept that in yourself, you'll accept it in others. And when you do that, and you stop being judgmental, you'll find silence. And when you find silence, you'll find creativity, insight, you'll be in touch with your soul, and that's when healing occurs. So positive thinking is so exaggerated. Be natural. There's nothing more attractive than somebody who radiates a simple, unaffected humanity. Like children.
We are here this evening with best-selling author Deepak Chopra. We have a question about Michael Jackson, since a lot of people know that you were good friends. Can you please talk about Michael Jackson's soul and what it's likely to be experiencing from the point of death until the present?
This is a very, very complicated question. You know, what happens after death? I've written a whole book on it. It's called Life After Death. So you'd have to study that. But just remember that there is no such thing as a permanent personal identity. You are not the same person you were 10 years ago. You have a different mind, you have a different personality, hopefully, that you're growing, okay? You have a different emotional state. You had, when you were 2 years old, you were a different person. So, you know, what we call a person, there's no such thing as a person. There's a soul that is on a continuum of transformation. And that transformation occurs right now. You do not survive as a static entity in life. So why would you survive after death as a static entity? The soul's journey through cosmic time is one of evolution. So think of that principle when you think of a person like Michael Jackson or whoever. Michael Jackson, when he was alive, was in your consciousness. When he's dead, he's in your consciousness also. Now, it's more complicated than that.
Do you, Deepak, use over-the-counter medicines or prescription medications, or do you use purely alternative therapies, subtle action?
I don't use either because I don't get sick. I'm being honest. So I don't use. But, you know, I think you should know that 80% of prescription drugs are of optional or marginal benefit. So that means if you didn't use them, it would make a bit of a difference to the natural history of your disease. If you have one, it would save you money and side effects. Have you ever watched a commercial for minor drugs on television? You know, you can take this for your dyspepsia, but be careful, it can lead to anything from impotence to death. Okay? It's 80%. Now, you know, we have this huge debate on healthcare reform. It's not about healthcare reform, it's about insurance reform, which is necessary too. But we're not talking about healthcare reform. You want really healthcare reform? Look at 2.5 million surgeries that are done which are not indicated. $700 billion of lab tests that are not indicated. Why do you think there are 4 times as many lobbyists in Washington on healthcare than there are congressmen in Washington? You know, we spend $2.4 trillion a year on healthcare. We don't even rank in the first 30 in the world in healthcare. There's a lot of wastage in healthcare. And much of what is being talked about end-of-life care is end-of-life suffering. We prolong end-of-life suffering. We do not prolong end-of-life life. So if you want to get really true healthcare reform, look at 80% of the diseases that are preventable. You know, 80 to 90% of your healthcare dollars go into diseases that are preventable. So we're not even close to really good healthcare.
I have a couple of questions on dreaming. What is the purpose of dreaming, and what does a bad dream indicate?
Dreams are actually a mechanism to release stress. What happens is that during whatever memories we have, whatever choices we've made, thoughts, you know, this is part of your soul's software. There's a story of the Buddha standing on the streets of Benares, and India was crowded even then. They're waiting for the traffic to clear. And Ananda says to Buddha, "Can you explain life to me?" And Buddha says, "Look at that wheel of a chariot that's passing by right at that moment. It's karma, memory, and desire." So karma is past experiences which create memory, which create desires. And every thought that you have is either a memory or a desire. and it comes from your soul. And the same thing happens at night, except it's all jumbled up, so we call it a dream. And if you stop the process of dreaming, then what happens? You know, if you take, say, heavy amounts of alcohol or drugs, sleeping pills, tranquilizers, and you stop dreaming, it can lead to a psychotic state. You know, when you suddenly withdraw from that, you have hallucinations. You dream even while you're awake because they've been suppressed. Dreams are a way of releasing stress, and if you don't release it, then it can lead to psychosis. Now, having said that, dreams can be symbolic expressions of things that you're thinking about. You can have lucid dreaming, you can have creativity in dream, you can have insight, and you can learn to witness your dreams, which is a very valuable thing to do.
What is the role of pleasure and pain in connecting the body with consciousness?
Pleasure and pain are experiences of contrast. If you didn't have pleasure, you wouldn't know what pain is. If you don't have darkness, you don't know what light is. If you don't have up, you don't know what down is. You don't have hot, you don't know what cold is. So our consciousness differentiates into experience by creating contrast. And therefore both pain and pleasure are necessary. But when you hang on to your pain and pleasure, then that's called addiction.
There's a little note here from Desi Hits saying, "Happy birthday. Can music be meditative? If so, which genre? Do you use music to relax?"
Music is one of the most important experiences for healing. In fact, now there are studies that show that if you give somebody Narcan is a narcotic antagonist, then they don't enjoy music anymore, because music is metabolized into opiates in your body. And these opiates are immunomodulators. And it doesn't matter which genre of music. As long as you enjoy it, as long as it gives you a feeling of ecstasy, or a feeling of joy, then that music is causing some very profound biological effects. What kind of music do I like? I like the Beatles. I'm old-fashioned.
My favorite too. We are here this evening with best-selling author Deepak Chopra. The next question is, have you been with someone when they pass away? And what do you think happens to their soul?
See, I have been with many people when they pass away. After all, I'm a doctor and I used to work in the emergency room, so I used to see people passing away all the time. One thing I can tell you, they never said, "I wish I'd spent more time at the office." Okay. What happens to the soul? What happens to the space we're in if these walls collapse? What happens? Nothing happens, right? Let's say you and I are speaking on the phone and we cut off the phone lines. What happens to you and me? Nothing. So nothing happens to the soul. The soul is always there. Soul is being transcendent, being non-local. Remember, the word non-local has no location in space-time. So nothing happens to the soul. What happens is to your body. Your body disintegrates. Okay. Nothing happens to the soul. The soul is non-local. And non-local means, in a non-local universe, there's nowhere to go. You're transcendent. But if you understand discontinuity, that everything is going on and off, the atoms are going on and off, molecules in your body are going on and off, you're recycling your body all the time. The universe is a big recycling plant. And just like your body is also always recycling, your mind recycles too, right? Because all your emotions, all your thoughts is recycled energy and information. And now if we understand information theory, information is just like energy is never destroyed, information is never destroyed too. Information resides in a non-transcendent domain. And so too consciousness cannot be destroyed. So the short answer is, consciousness outlives the death of the physical molecules through which it expresses itself. And you talk a number of physicists who study consciousness, they say being non-local, it is mathematically impossible to kill consciousness. So it's mathematically impossible that you won't survive death.
Switching.
Read books about this. Read my book, Life After Death, or read Erwin Laszlo. He's a Hungarian scientist who talks a lot about what is called the zero-point energy field, which is the same thing as consciousness.
Switching to your business side, Deepak. You're an amazing success as an entrepreneur and as a businessman. What do you believe is the unique selling proposition of your business? What's your management style and philosophy? And what is your definition of work-life balance?
First of all, I never in my life focused on business. It just happened. And even now, I'm not engaged actively in business like the Chopra Center and everything else. It's taken care of by other people. And they own the business as well. So I don't own my own business. I focus on expressing myself, and I focus on how to enlarge my understanding of healing, from physical healing to spiritual healing to emotional healing. And now I'm engaged in bigger projects like addressing social justice and global warming, etc. I have a non-profit foundation. I'm glad you brought this up because I have started something called a Start Fund along with a European philanthropist, and we fund projects all over the world, anywhere from 25,000 to 100,000. So if you have an interesting project in your community, you go on our website, deepakchopra.com, go to Chopra Foundation, look for Start Fund, and the whole thing is done on the internet. If you qualify, then there's an interview. And we are spreading this global Start Fund idea to create an economy of giving globally. And you're welcome to participate in it, either as a contributor or as somebody who wants to use the funds for a worthy project. So I've never really focused on business because I dislike the first sentence they teach you in business school, which is that the purpose of a business is to improve shareholder value. I think the purpose of business is to improve the quality of life on this planet and the quality of communities. And if you can do that successfully, you will be enormously successful. So just focus on what are your unique skills, what's your passion, how can you express it to improve the quality of people in your community or in the world, and you'll be a successful businessman.
We are here this evening with best-selling author Deepak Chopra. Congratulations on your foundation. Thank you for doing that work. But following that, you're seen as a guru to the rich and famous, especially to Hollywood celebrities. Do you feel you've lost touch with the family that was put out of their home this summer, or the senior who lost his pension to Wall Street excesses, or the single sick mother in the inner city living on disability?
First of all, the whole Hollywood celebrity thing is a media phenomenon, okay? If you asked me what's the percentage of people from Hollywood that I come into what's my activity with Hollywood celebrities, it would be less than 0.1% of my total work. Less than 0.1%, but of course it makes the news. And my activity right now is principally writing my books, doing my workshops, and my non-profit work with the Chopra Foundation and the Start Fund.
Deepak, does a comatose patient have a soul?
Yes, does. Try and remember that the soul is non-local. So, you're listening to Beethoven on the radio and your radio is not working. Does that mean that Beethoven is not being broadcast? Okay. Your nervous system in your brain is a localizing mechanism for a field of consciousness that transcends space and time. And therefore, it doesn't matter whether you're comatose or you're dead, your soul is always there. Am I making sense? When you read Shakespeare, it's Shakespeare in the ink, but comes through the ink, right? The consciousness of Shakespeare. So too, consciousness, which is non-local, comes through the nervous system and your biology, but it's not located in. I spent the first half an hour talking about this. Huh?
Just making sure everyone's listening. You've talked about God as a woman. What aspect of the feminine do you think exemplifies the divine?
Well, I do that just to shake people out, because people usually think of God as a dead white male in the sky, especially in the West, right? So God is actually neither a man nor a woman. God is infinite potential, infinite consciousness, infinite source of energy, information, space-time, and universes upon universes. If you now understand that there are parallel universes, God is too magnificent, too big to be conceptualized. We do a disservice to God when we conceptualize God. Without God, there's no conceptualization, but God is beyond our imagination. Now, having said that, of course, because God has infinite attributes, God definitely can be symbolized in feminine archetypes, which we do in India. We have the great goddesses, Saraswati and Lakshmi and Durga and many others. These are archetypal, symbolic expressions of higher states of consciousness that represent truth, beauty, harmony, affection, tenderness, peace, higher consciousness, intuition, insight, creativity. These are feminine attributes. And in the culture that we are living now, we need to embrace these feminine attributes because, you know, basically, as they say, in evolution, survival of the fittest is the past phase of our evolution. The future belongs to survival of the wisest. And wisdom includes those feminine traits of beauty, intuition, nurturing, tenderness, affection. When you think mother, what do you think? All those qualities. So God can be thought of as the feminine face of God, which in India is called Shakti, and the Jews call Shekinah.
You are an inspiration to so many people. Who do you admire and why?
Who do I admire and why? In recent times, people who I've admired are people like, I mentioned Krishnamurti, but Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, President Obama, if I may say so, the leader of Costa Rica, Oscar Arias, started a movement of unilateral disarmament in the world. And so there are many people I have admired in the recent past. These days I'm obsessed with my grandchildren. I admire them the most.
It's wonderful. No particular segue to this question, but any thoughts about recreational drugs?
My first experience with spirituality was with LSD when I was 17. So, I can honestly say that it was my first kind of excursion into other dimensions. I do not recommend recreational drugs because they can damage the nervous system, and yet there are traditions in the world, particularly American Indian traditions, and also traditions amongst the Aborigines in Australia, and traditions even in India. You know, when I was actually, this is very interesting, Lata. When I was going to, we were going to Haridwar with the ashes of my parents. My father, who had just died, so we were taking the ashes to Haridwar, and my brother and I, my brother was now the Dean of Medical Education at Harvard Medical School. He and I, when we had the ashes of my father, and we were going in this taxi up to Haridwar, and we saw these sadhus. You know, sadhus are Indian holy men, and they looked totally stoned. Okay, so my brother asked the taxi driver, our car driver, what are they taking? And he said, ganja, sir, ganja. So my brother said, can we get some? He said, no, you have to be enlightened to get it. So even in India, there's a tradition actually amongst these swamis, these danda swamis and other sadhus, where they take. But you know, the people who take those recreational drugs, they're not recreational. They're part of a ritual. And according to anthropologists, when you use these substances that have been used for thousands of years as part of a ritual, under shamanic supervision, they shift you, they trap your energy, they release your energy along certain lines. So I would not recommend anyone in this room try it on their own. If you really want to try it, then go to South America, go to Peru, look for a really authentic shaman who does these rituals.
The question is, does enlightenment come before drugs or drugs come before enlightenment? Okay.
Drugs will not lead you to enlightenment.
Next question. How do you stay unaffected and be a bright light around negative ego-identified people?
You don't pay attention. Simple. You just don't. You know, you can, whatever you pay your attention to, it will become part of your life. So, you know, a long time ago, I decided that if I was going to do what I do, I have to be immune to criticism, but I have also to be immune to flattery. You just don't pay attention. And if you have a wife and children, they make sure that you can't take yourself seriously.
Who is your favorite form of the divine? Do you worship God in the traditional Hindu manner with pujas?
I don't. I'm embarrassed to say it, that I don't, except when I'm in India, and I was recently, like 2 weeks ago, and I went to a temple. Because I was very interested in the architecture of this temple. And the priest actually did a puja and a havan, and I was totally overwhelmed by the beauty of it. So I realized that I should actually do this, because rituals and pujas and traditional prayers have a very profound effect on your consciousness, because they're part of our archetypal imagination, and they're also part of our cultural history. But I haven't been the type of person who does those things. And when I do them, I enjoy them. My practice, personal practice, is I do 2 hours of meditation every morning from 4 to 6.
Have your interactions with your grandchildren changed your philosophy or worldview in any way?
I don't know if they've changed my philosophy or worldview, but it's been a lot of fun. I mean, I talk to them a lot, and I have immense interactions with them, and I find that they're absolutely, maybe it's just my grandchildren, but I think they're brilliant, absolutely. And or maybe it's all children. But there's nothing more profound than an interaction with a child if you want to learn about life.
What do you think about scientific discoveries being made in the field of anti-aging? If we realize we are pure energy, as you suggest, does that mean we will live longer than the 110 years the oldest humans are able to live to today? What are some strategies you would recommend to ward off aging?
Read the book, okay? But here's something very interesting, and that is that the fastest growing segment of the American population today, and in much of the world, if you cut out infant mortality and things like that, is over the age of 100. So people are living longer anyway. Secondly, there's a different biological expression of aging. So when you hear expressions like today's 80s, yesterday's 60, and today's 60s, yesterday's 40, happens to be true. There are many studies that show that in cultures where aging is thought to be a good thing, you know, when in cultures, many Eastern cultures, and even in the Middle East and Afghanistan and many places, including Georgia and Russia, not Russia, but some of the former republics of Russia, the tradition is that as people grow older, they are venerated, they are honored, they are put on a pedestal, they are respected, they are given more responsibility. In fact, when you do aging studies on this population, it's very difficult to do it because people exaggerate their ages because aging is glamorous. When society has that attitude towards aging, the whole biochemistry of aging changes. Because, you know, part of our aging is the hypnosis of social conditioning. You think, you know, 65, now I'm going to go to Florida and then play golf, then you're done. Okay, that we follow these cultural mindsets, or what they're called memes. One of the recent studies that I forgot to mention is that telomeres, you've heard of telomeres, this year's Nobel Prize was given to the biologists who worked on telomeres. telomeres are like little buttons at the end of shoelaces, and they prevent DNA from fraying, just like your buttons at the end of your shoelaces prevent your shoelaces from fraying. As people grow older, their telomeres grow shorter, and it's said that at 120 telomeres will disappear, and that's your biological clock. But now recently studies have shown, and this is Dean Ornish again with other scientists, that you can lengthen your telomeres through meditation, through exercise, through yoga. This is very absolutely amazing, because once again reinforces the idea that DNA is not fixed, that your genes are fluid structures in consciousness. More to come. In the future, there'll be nanorobots, there'll be selective cloning, there'll be stem cells that will reprogram your aging process. So what the limit is, I don't know, can't tell. But I can tell you that if you can stay healthy for the next 10 years, wait for some miracles.
Okay, unfortunately, we've reached that point in our program where we just have time for one last question. And I think this is true from all of us. Deepak, what do you do for fun?
I'm having fun all the time, but I do ski, I do scuba dive, and these days I play golf, but these days if I have any extra time, I spend it with my grandchildren.
I hope you have all enjoyed tonight's program brought to you by the Commonwealth Club Silicon Valley. Again, we would like to thank Deepak Chopra, author of Reinventing the Body, Resurrecting the Soul, How to Create a New You, our audience here in Santa Clara, and those of you joining us on the radio. And now this...
إن أعجبك الفيديو لا تنسى الإعجاب والاشتراك في القناة.